13th day of December 2021, Omicron coronavirus variant continues to spread at a phenomenal rate in several countries. In the U.S. state of Kentucky, deadly tornadoes wreak havoc, leaving a trail of complete devastation. Meanwhile, the Brazilian economy grapples with the high interest rates and inflation. For these and more stories, you're watching Switch Focus. I'm Harriet Chimeno. Our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Now to our top story. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is receiving treatment for mild COVID-19 symptoms after testing positive for the disease. A statement from the presidency says Ramaphosa started feeling unwell and a test confirmed COVID-19 and that he is self-isolating in Cape Town and is being monitored by the South African Military Health Service. Apollo James narrates.
Last week, Ramaphosa visited 4 West African countries. He and all members of his delegation were tested for COVID-19 in each of the countries during the trip. Some in the delegation tested positive in Nigeria and returned directly to South Africa. Throughout the rest of the trip, Ramaphosa and his delegation tested negative. Ramaphosa returned from Senegal on December 8th. Ramaphosa said his own infection serves as a caution to all people in South Africa to be vaccinated and remain vigilant against exposure. He has delegated all responsibilities to Deputy President David Mabuza for the next week. South Africa is currently battling a rapid resurgence driven by the Omicron variant, health officials say. The country recorded more than 18,000 new confirmed cases. More than 70% of the cases are estimated to be from Omicron, according to genetic sequencing surveys. After a period of low transmission, about 200 new cases per day in early November, South Africa COVID-19 cases began rising dramatically. On November 25th, scientists in South Africa confirmed the Omicron variant, which has more than 50 mutations. Omicron appears to be highly transmissible and had quickly become dominant in the country. So far, the majority of cases have been relatively mild and the percentage of severe cases needing oxygen have been low, says doctors. Apollo James, Switch Television.
Now, still in South Africa, the former President Jacob Zuma, accused of orchestrating the systematic plan of government couffers during his rule, launched a new book on Sunday in which he intends to set the record straight. Sheila Ngetich with this report.
Titled Jacob Zuma Speaks, the book comes after the 79-year-old was released from prison in September due to ill health, just 2 months into a 15-month sentence for continually refusing to appear before corruption inquiry into his 2009 to 2018 presidency. Zuma's spokesman Mzwanele Manyi said the book can be bought for 300 rand or 1,000 rands for a signed copy at car boot sales in Joburg. Zuma was found guilty in June after refusing to obey a court order to appear before a commission probing state capture, the siphoning off of national assets, which occurred on massive scale under his 9-year tenure. His initial imprisonment in July sparked an unprecedented wave of violence in which more than 350 people died in his home province of KwaZulu-Natal and financial hub Johannesburg.
I came here today to collect my book that I just bought so that I can go through it. As they say that Jacob Zuma speaks, I want to hear from the man himself that what could have happened, because there's only one version that we've been getting from the media. So I said today, this is the opportunity actually to go through his book and understand what could have happened.
All the information that is in this book is verifiable. There's not much of a value judgment. It's really verbatim. Who said what, when, and all of that, how much was spent from all credible sources.
Critics accuse the ex-president of using ill health as an excuse to further delay a drawn-out corruption trial relating to a 1999 purchase of arms from 5 European firms. Deputy President at that time, Zuma is accused of pocketing bribes from French defense giant Thales and faces 16 charges of fraud, graft and racketeering. He has repeatedly claimed the justice system was hounding him for political moves. Jacob Zuma Speaks, written in the third person, contains testimonies from former allies who have since fallen silent. Sheila Ngetich, Switch TV.
Thank you, Sheila, for that report. Now, the 12th Chinese Peacekeeping Engineering Unit to WOW in northwestern South Sudan completed rotation with the former batch on Saturday. The first deploying of China's 12th Peacekeeping Engineering Unit to WOW arrived in Juba, the country's capital, on November 24th. Following the COVID-19 prevention procedures, the Chinese peacekeepers were quarantined for 14 days in a transition camp. Starting Friday, the Chinese peacekeeping troops flew to the WOW mission area in succession. The new engineering unit took over weapons, equipment and anti-epidemic goods from its predecessors. The two teams also had in-depth exchanges on the surrounding environment of the camp, anti-epidemic measures and precautions for carrying out missions. The 11th Peacekeeping Engineering Unit, consisting of 268 Chinese peacekeepers, was highly praised by local residents and United Nations departments for completing missions such as road and bridge repair and building and humanitarian aid since they started the mission in November last year. Now, health workers in Spain demonstrate through the streets of capital Madrid, pushing for more government funding in the public healthcare system. This comes as daily infections have soared in recent weeks, despite it being one of the most vaccinated countries in Europe. Terry Dubai with more.
East with a worsening epidemic situation, thousands of health workers took to the street to protest over the lack of funding in the public healthcare system. In Madrid, the regional government said they had provided sufficient resources for primary health care. However, in the new budget allocation for health, which totals to $7.5 billion, only less than 1% has been allocated to primary care, which is simply not enough to tackle the current crisis. Those on the streets urged that primary health care has been largely ignored.
We have suffered huge cuts to the health system. We have lost over 3,000 beds, and we need to reduce our waiting list for surgery, diagnosis, and regular consultations. We have people waiting for over a year for surgery right now.
Their demands come at a time when local healthcare centers are under increasing pressure as the country's 14-day incidence rate reaching about 300 cases per 100,000 inhabitants.
All the COVID-19 reinforcement workers are now being sacked. People risked their lives in terrible conditions and now they're sacking them. We need them. We absolutely need those workers.
Although it is still too early to tell the impact of the new Omicron variant will have on the already fragile healthcare system, for those on the front line certainly feel that more could be done to support them in the fight against the ravaging pandemic. Terry Dubai, Switch TV.
An Air China plane carrying COVID-19 vaccines donated by China arrived in Nicaragua on Monday, days after the two countries announced the resumption of the diplomatic relations. The plane transported 200,000 doses of vaccines produced by Chinese medical giant Sinopharm. The donation comes days after the Central American country announced re-establishing diplomatic relations with China and severing ties with the island of Taiwan.
Extremely happy to bring the good news to the Nicaraguan people that we have established the diplomatic relations, which is also reconfirmation of historic relations between the Sandinista party and the Communist Party of China. We are very happy. This is like a big Christmas gift for Nicaraguan people.
The Biden administration has convened the Democracy Summit in Washington, D.C. However, critics have dismissed it as the host nation for the summit, saying the U.S. has a long history of interfering in the other countries' democratic processes.
Well, it's curious that the Biden administration has chosen to do a democracy summit. There is a democracy summit held every year. It's the UN General Assembly, which the United States government doesn't take seriously. Well, if it's a democracy summit, it's curious that they decided to not allow certain countries to join. I think this is an issue. You know, you can't say it's a democracy summit and then make undemocratic invitations. Some people just not allowed to even approach the podium, as it were. Washington, D.C. has a long history of conducting overt coup d'etats. We saw it in 1953 in Iran and then onwards. This is, of course, now established. Nobody denies that it happens. But there are also very sly ways in which the United States interferes in other countries' democratic processes. And this is a real concern in the world because, I suppose just a few months ago, Mr. Biden made a statement saying, countries should not interfere in other countries' elections. Well, that's well said. And so therefore, the United States should stop interfering in other countries' democratic processes, such as in Bolivia, where the US government conducted a coup in 2019. Now, luckily for the Bolivian people, they fought hard and they were able to reestablish their government. The United States conducted a coup in Honduras in 2009. Again, it took a long time, but the Honduran people fought back and they elected Xiomara Castro. So it's a curious business, to have this talk of democracy so sanctimoniously from a state where there is a published record of interference in other countries' democratic processes.
We now take a short break, but we'll be right back with more. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Switch Focus. My name is Harriet Chimea and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Now we move on where Venezuela has been gripped by hyperinflation over the past 4 years, widening the gap between those who have access to dollars and those who don't. With Venezuela overshadowed by hyperinflation, the use of dollars has emerged as an alternative to overcome the lure of Bolivar bills and to protect the income of citizens. However, up till now, the country's dollarization has been an informal process among residents. Chapter Boyd with the story.
For almost 2 decades, Joana Villegas has been transporting people across Caracas. He uses his jeep to take passengers to Pitar, one of Venezuela's largest slums. Villegas says he has noticed how the local currency, the Bolivar, is slowly disappearing.
The Bolivar is useless. It is not a guarantee here or everywhere, and it is worthless here.
After 4 years of hyperinflation, Bolivar's bills are scarce and dollars are becoming more present in daily routines, like paying for a bus ride.
These days you try to pay with the dollar and you need to spend it all because there is no change.
A leading financial consulting firm estimates 67% of all retail transactions in Venezuela are made in dollars. The money often comes from savings, remittances, digital payment methods, or relatives are traveling home with cash. Store owners have also adapted to the new reality as across-town posters showing prices in dollars are common. Jose Luis Gomez owns a grocery store in the Pitar slums and says the merchandise he sells is priced in US dollars.
The dollar goes up and the Bolivar has been devalued, so you earn less. So right now it is more profitable to work with dollars.
Shusala Mario Hosman says using dollars is simpler and helps to keep the economy moving.
We buy our products in dollars and dollars will always be circulating. The Bolivar is constantly deteriorating. Sometimes it is high, other times it's low. Our dollar will always be the same.
Economists argue dollarization doesn't help Venezuela's long-term economic crisis, especially as most of the local salaries remain in bolivars. 3 in 4 Venezuelans live in extreme poverty, according to an academic study conducted by Venezuelan universities. The unregulated dollarization in the country is widening the gap between those who have access to dollars and those who don't. Chepto Boit, Switch TV.
Thank you, Chepto, for that story. Now, China's Macau Special Administrative Region held a memorial ceremony on Monday to mourn the 300,000 victims of the 1937 Nanjing massacre. The memorial ceremony began at 9 at the Macau Academy of Public Security Force to the Chinese national anthem, with over 300 attendees from all walks of life mourning the victims who were brutally killed by Japanese aggressors after they occupied Nanjing, then capital of China, on December 13, 1937.
should always remember our history. For young people in Macau like us, such activities allow us to experience and also feel our nation more directly and deepen our sense of national belonging and identity. Now, you see, remembering the past also inspires us to create the future.
It is my first time to attend a public memorial on the spot. We had memorials at school in the past, but you feel different on the spot here as you are touched by the solemnity and seriousness. Then you feel motivated never to forget the nation's humiliation and bear it in mind, with which you study and keep hard advancing to build our country.
Several countries, including Bahrain, Mauritius, Cyprus and Malawi, found their first case of the Omicron variant of COVID-19 in the last 3 days. But experts say the virus strain may cause less severe cases than the Delta variant. The Omicron variant of the SARS-CoV-2 virus is expected to become the major source of COVID-19 infections in the UK by mid-December, according to the UK Health and Safety Executive. Shepta Boyd with more on this coverage.
The HSE Saturday reported 633 Omicron infections in the past 24 hours, bringing the total number of Omicron cases in the country to 1,898. The HSE warned on Friday that if the variant continues to spread at the current rate in the UK, Omicron patients will account for more than half of all new COVID-19 infections by mid-December, thus making the major coronavirus strain ravaging the country. Israel's Health Ministry Saturday night reported 20 Omicron patients in the past 24 hours. Among the 55 active Omicron cases, 36 are inbound personnel from South Africa, Britain, France and other countries. 11 are infected after a close contact with the inbound patients and 8 are locally transmitted. The Israel government on Thursday decided to extend the travel entry restrictions for another 10 days. The Omicron COVID-19 variant continues spreading to more countries as Bahrain's health ministry on Saturday reported its first Omicron case who was traveling from abroad. Mauritius reported its first 2 Omicron cases on Friday, one of whom is a tourist traveling from South Africa and another is a local resident who had had close contact with a person returning from South Africa. Cyprus Health Ministry Friday reported its first 3 Omicron cases, all of whom are students traveling back from abroad. Malawi identified the country's first 3 cases of the Omicron variant on Thursday by genomic sequencing of the 12 COVID-19 positive samples collected between November 9th to December 2nd. The Omicron variant was first detected by South African scientists and doctors in their country. The experts think the variant may cause less severe cases of COVID-19 than the Delta variant. About 70% of the new COVID-19 cases in South Africa recently are attributed to the Omicron variant. A study of the newly confirmed COVID-19 cases in recent weeks by South Africa's National Institute for Communicable Diseases found that only about 30% of those hospitalized with COVID-19 have been seriously ill, less than half the rate as during the first weeks of the previous pandemic waves. Average hospital stays for COVID-19 have been short at this time, about 2.8% compared with 8 days. Just 3% of patients hospitalized recently with COVID-19 have died, versus about 20% in the country's earlier outbreaks. Chepto Boyd, Switch TV.
Now, discarded batteries are posing environmental and health risks to the people in the Gaza Strip. This comes after Israel stopped importing batteries from the Strip for recycling in 2008. The solid waste have piled up like hills in 30 different locations throughout the Gaza Strip. Most of these locations are near residential neighborhoods, increasing the risks to the residents living in the vicinity. Apollo James with the full details.
Abu Hazem, a Gaza resident, says locals have always demanded that waste collection dumps be kept away from residential quarters due to the dangers to people's health.
Solid waste is considered as a danger to our lives, especially to children, as they cannot differentiate between harmful and useful things. Also, some people are not fully aware of the danger of waste. They keep everything they find without knowing what the objects are.
The Palestinian Environmental Authority in Gaza Strip has repeatedly warned of the danger of accumulating more than 25,000 tons of damaged batteries in the region and called on international community to intervene urgently and help. Neurologists and environmentalists in Gaza found in a study that during the past 3 years, hundreds of children were infected with lead poisoning, which causes a number of serious diseases such as kidney failure and mental disability, according to Mesler.
There is a great risk of pollution to the environment because these damaged batteries contain heavy metals that are very dangerous to human health and the environment, such as mercury and lead. So the random accumulation of batteries and the breakage of structure surrounding these batteries pose a great danger.
In the Gaza Strip, there is no factory that has capabilities required to recycle hazardous waste such as batteries, as the industrial sector lacks the minimum tools and equipment needed for recycling. A high percentage of Gaza's 2 million residents depend on batteries as a cheap alternative source for energy due to the lack of fuel, which leads to frequent power cuts that could last for more than 10 hours a day. Gaza was completely dependent on exporting batteries through Israel for recycling, but Israel stopped the import and banned the entry of any materials from the manufacture of batteries into Gaza after imposing its blockade in the city in 2008. In light of the high rates of unemployment and poverty in Gaza, electric batteries will remain as the most appropriate solution to provide electricity for Gazans. Apollo James, Switch Television.
Thank you, Paula James, for that report. Now, the Brazilian economy is in a recession as the country grapples with the high interest rates and inflation. Worse still, Brazil is losing momentum as it tries to recover from the pandemic. However, economists say the government has limited tools to fight it. Brian Wender reports.
Taxi driver Roberto feels the impact of inflation hitting his life from all sides. The steep increase in the price of fuel caused by oil price hike and the devaluation of Brazil's currency has reduced his income. When he goes to the market to buy food for his family, all prices have gone up. Utility bills like water and electricity have also increased.
I had to increase my working hours. I used to drive about 8 to 10 hours per day, and now I work for up to 15 hours every day. And at home, we have to buy less things, about 25% less. We have been buying very little beef, for example.
Is one of many challenges the country is facing.
Inflation is a concern worldwide, with commodity prices up exacerbated by global pandemic supply chain bottlenecks. But Brazil's economy is getting squeezed further by the steep devaluation of its currency and a historical drought that has depleted hydroelectric reserves and sent energy prices soaring.
Subiu. Prices have gone up a lot. Beans are more expensive. Rice and beef too. Everything we buy has some extra costs.
It's tough, really tough. We go to the market, spend a lot of money and leave with just 3 bags of good. Now I have to go to the market with a shopping list and buy only what's most important.
It's not going to be useful to increase the Selic rate right now, because as it's inflation from the supply side, not the demand side, it won't work as the central government wants. But the problem with the increase of inflation, increase of the Selic rate, the interest rate in Brazil, there is only one outcome that we can wait for. It's lower growth of the GDP.
Brazil's central bank has increased the country's basic interest rate and the so-called Selic rate to try and tame inflation, but this strategy may have a limited impact.
China's urban and rural areas have seen remarkable improvement in the ecological environment over the past 40 years, with people's active participation in voluntary tree planting activities helping to advance this cause. On December 13, 1981, the 4th session of the 5th National People's Congress adopted the resolution on unfolding a nationwide voluntary tree planting drive, which has been well received and is flourishing across the country. Letina Lemayan with more.
Zuku City, central China's Henan province, the Zuku Forest Park, which covers around 5,000 micron unit, used to be a dry, sandy patch. Now, it has been transformed into a natural ecological garden, as locals ramped up afforestation efforts over the years. The voluntary tree planting activity also brought great changes to China's rural villages. People in Maji village of Zhongzhou City, East China's Jiangsu province, enjoy beautiful scenes of swamp cypress by the lake and green pines on the mountains. To date, China has seen 17.5 billion people joining voluntary tree planting activities, and more than 78 billion trees have been planted over the past 40 years. The greenery coverage of China's city increased to 41.11% from the 10% in the early 80s, and the parkland per capita expanded to 14.8 square meters from 3.45 square meters in the early 80s due to promotion of voluntary tree planting activities. Letina Lemayan, Switch TV.
Well, Latina's story brings us to the end of our bulletin. My assigned anchor has been Tracy Dorcas, my producer Shilengeti Chinai, Harriet Chimea. Enjoy the rest of your viewership.